Imagine planning the wedding of your dreams, only to have someone try to steal it from you piece by piece. That's exactly what happened to me. Before I tell you how my mother-in-law tried to hijack everything and how I finally watched her crown crumble in front of the whole family, make sure you hit subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who loves a good dose of justice served cold. They say weddings bring families together, but mine felt like a slow execution of who I was. From the moment Alex placed the ring on my finger, his mother appointed herself executioner and judge, dressing it up as generosity. "Don't worry, I'm paying for everything," she announced like a queen feeding peasants crumbs. To everyone else, it sounded noble. To me, it sounded like shackles snapping into place. Every choice became hers. Every detail, her command. And with each gift she claimed to give, she stole another piece of me. This wasn't kindness. It was possession disguised as love. The night we announced our engagement, laughter and champagne filled the room. I wanted to bottle that moment, my joy unspoiled, unshadowed. But it shattered when Eleanor stood, her voice slicing the air sharper than glass. "I'll handle everything," she declared, and the crowd erupted in applause. Applause for her, not for us. I smiled weakly, frozen in place, watching her crown herself in front of my family. They thought she was generous. But I knew her currency wasn't money. It was control. And from that moment, I understood. This wedding wouldn't be mine. It would be her stage. Her reign began immediately. Lilies, my childhood dream flowers, dismissed as cheap and tacky. She demanded white roses instead, blank and bloodless, like gravestones. Our band of choice? Replaced with a quartet she handpicked, their music cold and precise, nothing like us. The menu I'd sketched with excitement? Rewritten, plated into decadence we couldn't taste without swallowing her pride. And always the same refrain, "Since I'm paying," her words became iron bars, clanging shut around me. To outsiders, she sounded benevolent. To me, she was the warden of a prison I hadn't noticed until the door locked behind me. I still remember that florist shop, rows of blooms, sunlight spilling through glass, my heart fluttering at the sight of lilies. Their scent carried memories of summer mornings and innocence I didn't know I'd miss. I opened my mouth to claim them, to breathe life into my dream, when Eleanor clapped her hands. "Roses. White roses. Nothing else will do." The florist's eyes flicked nervously between us. My voice shrank, a whisper drowned by her command. "Lilies might be nice," she chuckled, cruel and casual. "You'll thank me later, dear." In that instant, my dream didn't wither. She strangled it. Alex and I once loved a small garden venue, lanterns strung through trees, intimate and alive with promise. I imagined us there, surrounded by laughter and warmth. But Eleanor's lips curled when she heard. "Too small. Too ordinary. You need grandeur." Within days, she booked a ballroom dripping with chandeliers, marble walls cold as her smile. "Guests will be impressed," she said, as if the crowd mattered more than the vows. She didn't see me disappearing in that cavernous hall. Or maybe she did. Maybe that was the point. My intimacy buried under her chandeliers, my love suffocated by her pride. It spread like poison. Music. Dresses. Colors. Vows. Every corner of the wedding was colonized by her fingerprints, a slow erasure of me. I tried to speak to Alex, my voice trembling with frustration, but his response was always the same. Pleading eyes, whispered compromise. "She means well. Please don't start a war." But this wasn't peacekeeping. It was surrender. And he wasn't the one vanishing. I was. He wasn't the one forced to watch strangers praise his mother while his own fiancé grew invisible. Every compliment to her sounded like a eulogy for me. I was alive, but unseen. Family dinners turned into tribunals. Eleanor spread magazines across the table, pages of extravagance bleeding with gold and lace. "This cake will show everyone your marriage matters," she announced, as though affection could be baked into tears of sugar. I nodded, obedient, because any resistance was met with her tilted head, that saccharine smile concealing knives. "We'll see, dear." That phrase gutted me every time, slicing my opinions to ribbons. Around her, I wasn't a bride. I wasn't even a woman. I was a doll she dressed, a puppet she posed, a body present only to carry her vision. Her performance intoxicated the relatives. Every gathering became her theater, every conversation her chance to remind the crowd, "Don't worry, I'm paying for everything." The applause was sickening, a chorus of blind fools worshipping their queen. They called her a blessing. They called me lucky. I wanted to rip their words out of the air, shove them down their throats until they choked on the truth. But instead, I smiled, my silence twisted into grace. Alex squeezed my hand under the table, begging me not to detonate. He didn't see the bomb already ticking inside me, seconds away from shattering. The dresses broke me. I stood before the mirror in a gown she had chosen, fabric heavy and suffocating, veil trailing like a funeral shroud. It was beautiful, yes, but not mine. The reflection staring back wasn't me. It was a bride hollowed out, draped in someone else's choices, her identity strangled under satin. Eleanor clapped, her approval sharp as a whip. "Elegant," she said, like she was branding me. My hand touched the glass, trembling. I didn't see joy in those eyes. I saw absence. This wasn't a wedding dress. It was a coffin stitched in ivory thread. Sometimes, Alex whispered apologies at night, his arms wrapped around me like a promise he couldn't keep. "It'll calm down after the wedding," he murmured, stroking my hair. But that's what terrified me, that my wedding, my only wedding, would be nothing but endurance. I didn't want to survive the day. I wanted to claim it. Yet every time I tried to explain, he begged for peace, offering apologies as bandages over wounds Eleanor kept reopening. I lay there, my heart thrashing, wondering if the woman walking down the aisle would even be me, or just her obedient echo. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I sat with the invitations stacked high like gravestones. My name was embossed in gold, shining like a lie. The design wasn't mine. The wording wasn't mine. Even the paper smelled like her perfume, a lingering stain on my identity. Guests would arrive and marvel at her sacrifice, never seeing the corpse of a bride buried beneath her control. My fingers traced the letters, rage and despair coiling in my chest. This wasn't generosity. This was domination. My wedding was slipping away. And if I didn't fight back soon, I would never get it back. Eleanor didn't just want flowers and menus. She wanted obedience disguised as tradition, loyalty disguised as respect, silence disguised as grace. The more she smiled, the tighter the choke. She began rewriting the ceremony with rituals I had never seen, and every edit erased me a little more. I kept telling myself to be patient, to be kind, to be the bigger person. Patience tasted like ash. Kindness felt like a collar around me. It started as a suggestion, sweetly packaged and impossible to refuse. "A small ancestral blessing," she said, placing a hand over mine like comfort, eyes glittering like knives. The email arrived the next morning with a program mock-up: bow before the family altar, accept a garment from the groom's mother, repeat lines promising harmony and obedience. My name was there, printed beside actions I never agreed to perform. I read it again, then again, daring the words to change. They didn't. They sat there like verdicts. Tradition, she called it. Erasure, I called it, dressed in silk and incense tonight. I asked for balance, not dominance. Over coffee, I explained I wanted to include my mother's song, a quiet reading, something that felt like home. Eleanor nodded, stirring sugar until the spoon chimed against porcelain like a countdown. "Of course," she murmured, "we'll make space if time allows." Later, the updated schedule arrived trimmed to the minute. There was space for speeches praising her sacrifice, space for rituals sealing my obedience, space for a photo op with her chosen guests. My mother's song was gone. Home was gone. All that remained was theater, and I had been assigned the mask. Money hovered over every conversation like a drone, recording, threatening, reminding me who controlled the air above my head. If I questioned a choice, she sighed and mentioned deposits she'd placed, favors she'd called in, reputations she was risking. She performed generosity like a sacrament and wielded it like a cudgel. Relatives applauded her support, mistaking the sound of chains for celebration. Alex urged patience, voice frayed, eyes apologetic. He promised she would calm down after the wedding, the way tempests calm after ruining a coast. I smiled, because drowning people often look composed before they disappear. Into the dark. The rehearsal program hit like a verdict. 2 new segments appeared between hymns and vows, ancestral blessing and mother's instruction. The first demanded I kneel, the second required I accept a whisper I wasn't allowed to refuse. She framed it as honor, a gift to me, a gift to their lineage. I read the lines, my hands cold, imagining the audience watching me fold. Eleanor watched my face like a collector evaluating porcelain for cracks, delighted when she found them. I felt the crack widen, not from weakness, from fury contained too long beneath lace, smiles, and silence there. She pulled me aside after rehearsal, perfume sweet as rot, voice slow and syruped. I know change is difficult, she said, but good wives flourish inside structure. I asked whose structure. Her smile sharpened. The one that holds marriages together. I thought of my parents' love, messy, tender, equal, and understood she feared my freedom more than my failure. She touched my cheek like I was livestock, appraised and claimed. You'll thank me later. I nodded, because warfare sometimes wears etiquette. Inside, I counted exits, allies, and fires. I didn't want a scene. I wanted truth, witnessed clearly. That night, Alex and I sat on the floor, take-out boxes cooling between us like negotiations gone stale. He rubbed his temples, the boy in him pleading for peace, the man inside him flickering on and off. She can't help it, he said finally. It's how she shows love. I studied him, not unkind, and asked who taught him that love feels like ownership. He looked away. We were both quiet a long time. I'll talk to her, he promised. In his mouth, promise meant tourniquet, something tight to stop the bleeding, never a cure, always leaving bruises behind afterward. Morning delivered confirmations for decisions I hadn't made, a revised seating chart pushing my friends to the margins, a hymn inserted where my reading once lived, an invoice stamped paid by Eleanor with a note, consider this a gift. I stared until the text blurred. Each email removed something small while pretending to help, the way a thief smiles while holding your door. I drafted responses, deleted them, drafted again. Explaining why cuts hurt invites surgeons who love cutting. I closed my laptop and breathed, steady and cold. If I couldn't be loud, I would become immovable. Stone by morning. The vows broke something sacred. I'd spent nights crafting words that felt like breath, choice, devotion, humor, heat. The officiant handed me a replacement, typed, formatted, sterile. I read lines promising obedience to family above self, promising deference to elders in all household matters, promising to uphold traditions I had never been allowed to choose. My hand shook. The paper rattled. The room swam. Eleanor watched from the doorway, pleased like a scientist watching a specimen react exactly as predicted. I folded the page carefully, evenly, the way people fold flags. Then I put it down like a body gently. They praised my quiet compliance at gatherings, mistaking courtesy for consent, humility for harmony, survival for agreement. So graceful, they said, clinking glasses, admiring the way I disappeared on schedule. Eleanor basked, warmed by their adoration, certain she owned the story. Alex squeezed my hand under the table, whispering apologies that softened nothing. Silence can be strategy, but it is also a hunger that eats you from within. I felt gnawed, thinned, dangerously calm. There is a point where prey stops running and simply watches. I had reached it. My breath slowed. My eyes cleared. My patience ended. That night, I didn't want spectacle. I didn't want screaming. I wanted truth to bloom where everyone could see it, undeniable as blood on snow. If she demanded a stage, I would light it. If she required witnesses, I would provide them. I gathered what mattered, my original vows, a spine she hadn't purchased, allies who knew me before her performance. When the day came, I would not kneel. I would not repeat her lines. I would stand, and if the room chose sides, they would do it with their eyes open. Mercy is optional. Clarity is not. For everyone, especially her. The morning of the wedding felt like waiting for execution. My stomach was lead, my gown clung to my skin like a shroud, and every glance at the door made me expect Eleanor to stride in with another command disguised as tradition. For weeks she'd slithered into every seam of the ceremony, rewriting vows, orchestrating rituals, whispering that this day was hers. But today wasn't rehearsal. There would be no chance to bow politely and escape later. This was live theater, an audience assembled, every eye sharp. Eleanor wanted a stage. I decided if she wanted a stage, she'd bleed on it. The hall glittered, the kind of sterile grandeur she loved, chandeliers dripping crystals, roses blank and lifeless lining every aisle, quartet humming notes I hadn't chosen. Guests whispered admiration for her sacrifice, their voices brushing me like thorns. I walked forward with my father, every step rehearsed in silence, every smile forced like a grimace stitched to my face. I looked up at Alex. His eyes softened, steady, searching mine for calm. He didn't know yet that calm was gone. Inside me, patience had been buried. What rose in its place was something sharper, colder. Something Eleanor herself had birthed. The officiant began, words drifting like smoke. For one fleeting second, I allowed myself to believe it might proceed without her intrusion. Then she rose. Eleanor, in all her regalia, lifted a hand, stopping the ceremony like a conductor halting an orchestra. Before vows, she declared, her voice slicing through the hush, we must honor family tradition. Murmurs swirled. My stomach clenched. This was it, the moment she'd been plotting, her final theft of my voice, executed publicly, unavoidable. I glanced at Alex, pleading with my eyes. Would he bend again, or would he finally cut the cord binding him to her throne? The officiant froze, eyes darting between us, the silence thick with her entitlement. Eleanor's lips curved into a smirk, her triumph palpable. She'd engineered this moment perfectly, me trapped in lace, audience watching, Alex cornered by duty. I braced for collapse, expecting his shoulders to sink, his voice to falter. But instead, he turned. His hand tightened on mine, his jaw locked. No, he said, his voice sharp, final, unflinching. The word cracked like a whip across the hall. Gasps erupted, heads snapped toward him. Eleanor blinked, her smirk stuttering into shock. For the first time, she wasn't in control. He was. She recovered quickly, venom beneath honey. Alex, she whispered harshly, don't embarrass us. These are sacred traditions. But Alex didn't flinch. His voice carried, steady and merciless. Mom, this isn't your wedding. It's ours. And I won't dishonor my wife by kneeling her under your rules. Whispers rippled, heads tilted, guests stiffened. Eleanor's eyes widened, fury laced with humiliation. She'd chosen her battlefield poorly. This wasn't a rehearsal where silence could be coerced. This was public, irreversible. I felt the chains she'd wrapped around me loosen, falling heavy to the ground. For the first time, I inhaled without her shadow pressing down. Her face flushed crimson, teeth grinding behind a brittle smile. I've sacrificed everything for this day, she said loudly, daring the audience to nod, to reaffirm her crown. Alex didn't let her. You didn't sacrifice. You claimed. You stole. You tried to bury us beneath your pride. But not today. His words echoed, clean and brutal. The officiant, uncertain, looked to us. Alex nodded firmly. Continue, without her additions. Eleanor's breath hitched, a strangled sound of disbelief. Murmurs surged. The audience shifted. They'd seen her try to command the altar, and they'd seen her son deny her. Pride shattered in silence. When it was my turn to speak, my vows trembled in my hands, but not with fear, with rage honed into truth. I didn't read Eleanor's sterilized script. I read mine. Words of choice, of love, of freedom. My voice rang clear, and with every line, I stole background she'd taken. Alex's vows followed, fierce and protective. He promised me, not her, loyalty. He promised to shield, not to surrender. The audience leaned forward, transfixed. In that moment, Eleanor wasn't the matriarch, wasn't the benefactor, wasn't the queen. She was just another guest, watching her empire dissolve in real time. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. Rigid, bouquet clutched like a weapon she couldn't wield, knuckles white. Her lips trembled, forming words she dared not say. Around her, whispers swelled, disbelief, judgment, pity even. She'd built her entire image on control, on sacrifice, on being the savior. And now, in front of her curated audience, her facade cracked. I should have pitied her. Instead, I savored it. Every flicker of panic in her eyes was repayment. Every whisper that ignored her was justice. Eleanor had demanded reverence. Today, she received silence sharp enough to cut. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, applause thundered. It wasn't polite. It wasn't obligatory. It was raw, fierce, louder than Eleanor's boasts ever were. Alex kissed me, the world dissolving into warmth, but beneath the kiss I felt triumph coil like fire. She couldn't touch this. Not now, not ever. I clung to him, not as a bride smothered into obedience, but as a woman who had survived her attempted erasure. This wasn't just victory. It was resurrection. Eleanor had tried to bury me alive beneath her grandeur. But today, I walked out of the grave she dug, unbroken. As we turned down the aisle, petals raining, cheers rising, I saw her face one last time. Hollow. Shaken. A queen stripped of her throne. She clutched her clutch like a lifeline, her mask fractured beyond repair. Guests avoided her gaze, whispering not about her generosity, but her failure. That was the true tradition today. Not obedience, not ritual, but reckoning. She had built an altar to herself, and her own son burned it down. My dress swept past her, and I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The look on her face was already carved into memory forever. By the time we reached the doors, I felt taller, lighter, sharper than I had in months. The ceremony was ours, not hers. The vows were mine, not her script. The audience had seen her ambition stripped bare, her grip snapped like brittle glass. She had tried to weaponize tradition, to kneel me into silence, but instead, she was the one crushed beneath the weight of her own pride. As I stepped into the light, Alex's hand in mine, I knew this wasn't just a wedding. This was war. And today, I had tasted my first true victory. If the ceremony was a battlefield, the reception was meant to be her second chance. Eleanor swept into the hall with her chin high, her mask reapplied, as though humiliation at the altar had been a minor inconvenience. Pride doesn't surrender easily. It claws, it bites, it resurrects itself in smiles stretched too tight. The chandeliers glittered with her taste, the music echoed her demands, the menu whispered her extravagance. She wanted this to be her redemption, her moment to reclaim the crown she'd lost. But crowns forged from lies don't shine long. That night, hers cracked, then shattered. Guests buzzed with energy, their whispers circling like vultures. I caught fragments. Did you hear what Alex said? I've never seen a son defy his mother like that. They weren't talking about her sacrifices anymore. They were marveling at her fall. I glided through the room, Alex's hand tight in mine, savoring the shift. For once, people were seeing me, not just her. But Eleanor, she couldn't stand it. Her glass of wine trembled slightly as she watched the conversations drift past her, no longer orbiting her gravity. She was desperate for control again, and desperation makes people sloppy. Dinner had barely ended when she rose, her glass raised, her smile polished but brittle. The hall hushed reflexively, months of conditioning still lingered. She basked in the silence like it was oxygen. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, voice dripping honey, tonight would not have been possible without me. I sacrificed endlessly to give my son and his bride the wedding of their dreams. Polite applause followed. My jaw tightened, my stomach twisted. Her speech wasn't a toast, it was a reclamation attempt. She wanted the spotlight back. But she didn't realize she was already standing on a collapsing stage. She doubled down, her voice swelling with false humility. Every flower, every plate, every note of music, chosen and provided by me. It was my honor to give so much, so selflessly, for them. Her eyes glossed as though near tears, a performance polished by years of manipulation. Guests nodded, clapped again, murmuring admiration. My hands clenched under the table, nails biting into my palm. She was rewriting history in real time, painting herself as saint and savior. But saints don't lie, and saviors don't steal credit. The truth was simmering, waiting. And when it surfaced, it wouldn't whisper, it would roar. Then it happened. Alex's uncle, calm and deliberate, rose from his seat. The air shifted instantly, tension slicing the hall. He lifted his glass, his voice steady. With respect, that's not true. Murmurs rippled like wind through trees. Eleanor's smile faltered, though she recovered quickly, feigning warmth. Oh, brother, she cooed, surely you wouldn't argue on such a night. But he didn't waver. His gaze was steel. Truth matters, especially tonight. You've misled these guests long enough. Gasps erupted. My heart pounded, heat rushing through me. This was it, the crack splitting wide, the lie exposed under lights she had begged for. He gestured calmly around the hall. The venue? Paid for by me. The catering? My wife and I handled it. Most of these flowers? Arranged and covered by us. The silence was deafening, broken only by sharp inhales. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Eleanor's face strained, her painted elegance fracturing into panic. For months she'd repeated her refrain, I'm paying for everything, turning it into scripture. And now, in a single speech, the scripture was blasphemy, revealed as fabrication. Applause didn't follow this time. Only silence. Sharp, cutting, merciless silence. She wanted her crown back. Instead, it was torn from her head, audibly. She tried to laugh, brittle, desperate. Oh, well, of course, you contributed details here and there. But the bulk was mine. Everyone knows how much I sacrificed. Her voice cracked on the last word. But the audience had shifted. No nods. No applause. Just eyes, some pitying, some disgusted, most indifferent. Whispers filled the void. So she lied? All this time. Her empire of generosity was dissolving, her illusion collapsing under scrutiny. I sat frozen, savoring the unraveling. I didn't need to say a word. She was unraveling herself, thread by thread, the mask slipping to reveal something small and desperate. Her brother's voice cut sharper now, each word like a blade. You didn't sacrifice, Eleanor. You demanded. You claimed. You strutted on stage with other people's gifts and called them your own. That isn't generosity, it's theft of dignity. The hall erupted in murmurs, whispers multiplying. Eleanor's lips parted in outrage, but nothing came. She scanned the room, desperate for a lifeline, but found only lowered eyes, averted gazes. Her audience, the one she'd cultivated meticulously, was abandoning her. This wasn't just a correction. This was exposure, brutal and public. And Eleanor, who lived for performance, was finally choking on her own spotlight. Alex's hand brushed mine under the table, steady, reassuring. I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw no hesitation. His eyes were calm, resolved, no longer divided between wife and mother. The battle was over. Around us, laughter cautiously returned. Conversation shifted away from Eleanor entirely. She sat rigid, glass trembling, her mask broken into shards too sharp to reassemble. For months, I had dreamed of this. Her unraveling not in private, not in whispers, but in front of the audience she'd always craved. She wanted worship. Instead, she was being exiled in plain sight, stripped bare tonight. I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered the lilies dismissed, the vows rewritten, the dress chosen for me like a costume, the invitations that smelled of her perfume, the nights I whispered my true vows into the dark, praying they wouldn't die there. Pity has no place for tyrants. This was consequence. And watching her shrink, shoulders hunched, hands trembling as whispers spread like wildfire, I felt something colder than joy. Satisfaction. The kind that runs in your blood, heavy and final. She wasn't just losing control. She was being dethroned in front of her own congregation. The music resumed, the hall shifting back to laughter, to dancing, to life. But she couldn't follow. She sat in silence, a ghost in her own theater, ignored and irrelevant. She had entered the reception desperate to reclaim her crown. She left it shattered at her feet, trampled by the very people she sought to impress. Alex leaned close, whispering, "It's ours now." And it was. The reception no longer belonged to her narrative. It belonged to us. She wanted eternal admiration. Instead, she became a cautionary tale whispered over dessert. Pride had carried her high. Truth had buried her. By the end of the night, Eleanor was already a hollow shell of the queen she thought she was. Her mask had shattered under her brother's words. Her empire of lies turned to dust in front of the very crowd she tried to impress. But pride doesn't die quietly, it claws for air, even when drowning. She rose again, trembling but defiant, her smile cracked, her hands clutching her glass like a weapon. What she didn't realize was that her crown was already gone. She wasn't climbing back onto the throne tonight. She was being buried beneath it. Permanently. She raised her glass, her voice quivering yet loud enough to command silence. "Everything I did tonight," she began, "was out of love. For my son. For his bride." Her eyes flicked to me, sharp, accusing, as if I should bow in gratitude for the torment she'd inflicted. Once, her words might have drawn applause. Now, the room was quiet, suspicious, waiting. The silence wasn't reverence anymore. It was judgment. She didn't notice the shift. Or maybe she did and chose to gamble anyway. Pride makes gamblers reckless, even when the table is stacked against them. And tonight, she was bankrupt. Alex stood before she could go further. The scrape of his chair across marble rang louder than her voice, silencing the hall in an instant. He faced her, tall, resolute, his hand gripping mine with deliberate certainty. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, carrying across the hall, "this wedding isn't about you. It never was. You tried to twist it, claim it, remake it in your image. But tonight, everyone saw the truth. Everyone." Gasps rippled through the guests. Eleanor's lips parted in disbelief, her carefully rehearsed script collapsing in her throat. This wasn't private defiance anymore. This was execution. Her face crumpled, then hardened, cycling between panic and rage. "How dare you?" she hissed. "After everything I've sacrificed," Alex cut her off cleanly. "You didn't sacrifice. You suffocated. You lied. You made this about your pride, not our love. And now everyone here knows it." Murmurs surged, whispers darting like knives through the room. Her hands trembled as she clutched her glass tighter, searching the crowd for allies. But no one moved. No one nodded. The audience she'd worshipped for months had turned cold. She wasn't adored anymore. She was pitted, judged, dethroned live, in front of her kingdom of strangers. Her chair received her like a coffin when she sat, her shoulders hunched, her eyes glistening not with grief, but humiliation. For years, she'd ruled every room with her presence, commanded admiration with her false magnanimity. Now, she was just another guest, stripped of power, stripped of audience, stripped of her crown. I stared at her, my rage cooling into something cleaner, sharper. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel guilt. What I felt was relief. The weight she had pressed on me was gone, crushed under the rubble of her pride. She wasn't untouchable anymore. She was finished. Alex pulled me into the center of the floor, music swelling as our first dance began. Guests clapped, smiles genuine, the atmosphere finally free of her shadow. I let him hold me, his eyes soft, his grip steady, and for the first time that day, I felt joy untainted. This was our moment, ours alone. She sat frozen at her table, forgotten, her glass untouched. For months I had feared she'd stain every memory of this wedding. Instead, her downfall became the highlight. She wanted to be unforgettable. She was, but not as the benefactor. As the dethroned queen who fell publicly. She didn't leave. That was the cruelest part. She stayed, stiff and silent, watching laughter ripple through the hall, watching children twirl on the dance floor, watching joy bloom without her approval. And nobody turned to her anymore. Nobody asked her opinion. Nobody flattered her with compliments. She had been erased, exiled in plain sight. I caught her eyes once, and in them I saw not dignity, but fear of what life would look like without her crown. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of being nothing. That fear was my victory. She had caged me with silence. Now she wore it. The night ended with sparklers lighting our exit, the air alive with cheers and laughter. Guests waved, cameras flashed, and the path glowed with freedom. Behind us, Eleanor remained in her chair, surrounded by whispers she couldn't control, stripped of allies she couldn't command. She had come determined to reign, to cement herself as queen of our day. Instead, she was left to choke on the ashes of her pride, a dethroned monarch with no kingdom. Her silence told the story louder than any toast. She wasn't a savior, not a benefactor, not a matriarch. She was just defeated. And forgotten. As the car pulled away, Alex squeezed my hand. "It's over," he whispered. And I believed him. The battle she fought to crown herself had ended, not with applause, not with worship, but with humiliation etched into memory. Guests would remember the flowers, the music, the dancing. But more than that, they'd remember her collapse. They'd remember the queen dethroned at her own son's wedding. And me? I would remember the taste of freedom, sharp and clean, finally mine. This wasn't just the end of her reign. It was the beginning of ours. A beginning she could never touch again. She wanted to own my wedding, but instead, she lost everything: her pride, her power, and her crown. I walked away not just as a wife, but as a woman finally free. If you think she got exactly what she deserved, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story. Because trust me, there are plenty more tales where betrayal meets its downfall.